Hello again, Dr. Professor Salvatore Babones of the University of Sydney, Australia. Welcome again to the Inside Show.
It's a pleasure to talk to you.
I've discovered so many things that you are involved in. And the other day, I saw an op-ed that you had in the Australian newspaper Financial Review, which was about anti-Semitism on campuses. Let me ask you, in that op-ed, you argue that universities have become incubators um, for anti-Semitism. You describe rallies of glorifying Hamas, academics using Hamas imagery, and campuses covered in calls to destroy Israel. Why has this been tolerated for so long on university campuses worldwide?
It's tolerated at universities because universities are tolerant places. We tolerate many things that society in general would not approve of. More the question is, why is it accepted at universities? There's a difference between toleration, where you may not agree with something, but you agree with the system that allows this to happen. There are many viewpoints that we tolerate in society, even though we might condemn them. Uh, But in universities, there seems to be almost a welcoming environment for anti-Semitism. Certainly in some departments within universities, there's a very welcoming environment. There are entire departments and disciplines that have been created precisely to harbor, at least to harbor anti-Israel activism, and I strongly suspect also to harbor anti-Semitic viewpoints that is motivating that anti-Israel activism. So the real issue is not whether we tolerate it. We tolerate many things at universities, and we should tolerate wide varieties of opinion. But just because we tolerate it doesn't mean we have to accept it. And that's really been the problem at our elite universities, is a broad acceptance of viewpoints that are not accepted in our societies more broadly.
Interesting. Now, you write in your newsletter that I just got hold of that in these days it is difficult for anti-Semitism to flourish in business or government because those sectors require a certain degree of conformity in civil norms, which forces anti-Semitism and other antisocial behaviors underground. But in universities and the arts, individual self-indulgence to is at its peak. And although very few academics are anti-Semitic, those who are face relatively little pushback. That's a quite interesting observation, Dr. Babonis.
Well, thank you, but it's just an observation of something we see around us every day. So, for example, at publicly funded arts events in Australia and in the United States, my personal home country, and I'm sure in Europe as well, at publicly funded art events, it is not out of the ordinary for an actor or a producer to come on stage before the event and condemn Israel. Or for an actor when making bows to shout an anti-Israel slogan or an anti-Zionist slogan. Well, imagine someone doing that at a corporate board meeting. Imagine that happening if you're having a PowerPoint presentation about marketing strategy, and then someone at the end of the meeting were to shout an anti-Zionist slogan. That would be shocking, right? It would be completely you'd be spoken to by your supervisors, and if you did it twice, you would almost certainly be let go. It's not the sort of behavior we would accept. Yet in the arts world, it is not necessarily taken for granted, but artists and especially actors will believe that they have some kind of free speech right to do this. Now, they of course have a free speech right. They can go out in the public sphere and say what they want, but to hijack a publicly funded art performance at which people have paid for tickets, to come see it, that was, to my mind, it's wildly inappropriate behavior. Yet people are self-indulgent enough to feel like they can do it. The same in classrooms. If you're teaching a class certainly if you're teaching a class that is not directly related to the Palestine-Israel conflict, if you're teaching a class in general sociology or general anthropology or in English, to append onto your class anti-Zionist message or a pro-Palestine message, or to put in your profile on the university website, a Hamas imagery like a paraglider, landing with Palestinian colors, or to put in your email signature line
Yeah.
a pro Hamas or an anti-Israel message, again, that's something that's very self-indulgent that we would not accept in a official government communication, in a corporate communication. That is, we treat the arts association or the university as somehow a personal venue instead of treating it as a proper workplace. And the problem is not with the ordinary workplaces. The problem is with our academic and arts workplaces. That is, society should be exercising some degree of influence on how we behave. I mean, we behave in pro-social ways because everybody will react negatively if we don't. I mean, a lot of people say that we don't want to drive these views underground. And I say, no, exactly what we want to do is drive these views underground. That is, people should realize that if they're anti-Semitic, they should do that in private at home, and not let other people know because they'll be shamed if they do. In the same way that if they were, Nazis, they would do that at home. If they're racists, they'll do it at home and not do it in public. If they're terribly sexist, they won't say it in public because they know that doing these things in a public environment, while potentially legal and tolerated, is not something that they want to be known for. It will drive their friends away. It'll lose them employment opportunities. No one puts on their LinkedIn profile. I'm sorry, no normal person puts on their LinkedIn profile Justice for Palestine, unless they are a Palestine rights activist, because it's not what you bring into this sphere.
Nice.
Academics feel entirely entitled to bring it into their sphere.
Exactly. Now, in Norway, just this week, a professor at the University of Trondheim in Norway made some terrible statements and said that October 7, 2023 was a joyous day. And he was actually fired, or he resigned. He was forced to resign this week. So that's interesting.
Well, I'm always cautious about forced to resign. It's difficult to force somebody to resign. Now, I don't know this particular situation. Academics may be pressured to resign. They may be enticed to resign by being offered some kind of settlement that if they will leave quietly, they'll be given some money. If it's fired, it's fired. If it wasn't fired, I'd like to know the terms before I accept the narrative that the person was forced to resign. Now, I don't know academic freedom protections in Norway. In Australia or in the United States, academic freedom would generally protect statements like that. Even statements like that made in the classroom, it would generally protect. It would be limited in case the person was not teaching a related class. So in the US, it would be absolutely protected. In Australia, it would only be protected in a social science class or a humanities class. If you went into your chemistry class and taught that October 7th was a joyous day, you might face disciplinary action because that's not chemistry. And you can't make any argument that that's part of the chemistry curriculum. But there's broad leeway in general for academics in most Western countries to say what they want. And I believe there should be broad license to say what you want. But that doesn't mean we have to approve it.
Exactly. Interesting. Well, on this note, for example, the state of Israel is very recognized in business and commercial activities and trade between nations. And what you're saying is evident in that sphere. But in the same countries that deal with Israel in business, they will have very bad, terrible rhetoric against Israel.
Well, I'm not sure many businesses do. There's a difference between what individuals say in their private lives, what they might say on Twitter or on Facebook, and what they would say in public in a public forum. Now, academics and artists often feel empowered to, quote unquote, use their platform to say what they want. But of course, we don't expect corporate or government or not-for-profit leaders to use their platforms. This seems to be a conceit that is limited to academia and the arts, that it's their platform. But of course, it's not their platform. It's a platform that's been provided by society. Now, again, I want to be clear. I don't advocate that they should lose their jobs for making unpalatable statements. I think that the arts and academia do require a wide breadth of freedom to make your own to follow your own conscience. But, and the big but is, we can still call it out, we can still condemn it, we can still pressure universities. And just to put it in context, I mean, anti-Semitism is one thing, and people get very emotional about it. If a university academic were to advocate for advocate for extra scrutiny for African immigrants, the academic thought that African immigrants pose an extra danger and there should be extra scrutiny on their backgrounds. That would quickly be vilified as racist.
Yeah.
The academic would soon be investigated.
Yeah.
And if the academic was clean, they'd be fine. But the academic who vilifies Africans will face scrutiny in a way that the academic who never says anything and just does their job will not face scrutiny. Now, I think that kind of witch hunting is not appropriate. Again, I don't advocate it. I merely state the obvious fact that it happens. Exactly. And that we accept that it happens. I mean, there's a case right now pending at the University of Melbourne where a law professor had expressed skepticism about the degree of indigenous Aboriginal custom being brought into the law curriculum. And he was very skeptical of this, and he publicly expressed, well, he not even publicly, privately to the dean expressed this viewpoint. That led to an investigation, and they found that years ago he'd sent some emails that included disparaging remarks about Aboriginal Australians, and now he's facing dismissal for those disparaging remarks. Now, had he not brought the issue to the fore, he never would have faced scrutiny. Now, I'm not saying we should go through the emails of every anti-Semitic or potentially anti-Semitic academic and look for things they may have said that are inappropriate and get them for it. I'm merely reminding us that we accept that this happens. It happens for people who say things negative in Australia about Aboriginal people. It happens in the United States for people who say something negative about African Americans. So let's not be too precious about how our academic freedom protects everything we do. Society does police the boundaries of what's acceptable in polite society.
Exactly. Now, you write in your op-ed that professional activists have found a comfortable home inside universities where they can indoctrinate impressionable students from the lecture podium. How has this scholar activism dynamic contributed to the explosion of anti-Semitism we've seen on campuses since October 7th?
Look, activists have been doing this for as long as there's been universities. I mean, even maybe before there were universities in the modern sense, in that if you want to seduce or entice a group of people, the easiest group to entice or indoctrinate, especially if you have a message of social justice, the easiest group are young people because they have relatively little experience of the world. They don't know yet how much mendacity there is in the world. They're not necessarily aware of the complex issues involved. And so if you want to stoke passions about defending poor Palestinian children against the depredations of a colonial state, which is how it's framed with regard to Israel, students are an easy target because you show them the photos. There are photos of terrible suffering. I mean, Palestinian people have experienced terrible suffering. Children have experienced war. Nobody wants children to experience war. What the student doesn't understand is the child has experienced war because of the context that has been created by the adults around them. It's not just that some terrible, evil state decided we want to kill children. Nobody wants to kill children. Well, I hope, perhaps maybe on the Hamas side, we did see people who want to kill children. That's what's truly horrific. But university students are young and they're susceptible to these facile narratives about justice. And so people who want to attract a crowd try to get jobs at universities. And this has been done for at least a few hundred years. And I can go back to the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, and this being done at universities in Europe, trying to attract students who may not know the whole debate about Catholicism versus Protestantism. And again, academics trying to get their young, impressionable students on side. That said, the modern university doesn't have to provide a home for this.
Yeah,
It's not what the university's for. It's an abuse of the university.
exactly.
But if you are an activist and what you want to do is have a life of anti-Israel activism, where are you going to get the money for that? You can't do that as an accountant
Yeah,
unless you run your own practice. You can't do that as a lawyer. You can't do that as an engineer. You do that as an academic, where you are sheltered from any check on your behavior.
mhm,
And then other academics protect you. And the real tragedy is that we've seen the creation of literal nodes of anti-Semitism in universities where anti-Semites have hired other anti-Semites into their academic clique. Notoriously, peace and conflict studies as a discipline has been a vehicle for this. To be clear, I'm not saying that everybody in peace and conflict studies is anti-Semitic. I'm saying that the entire discipline of peace and conflict studies systemically was created as a home for people who want to criticize Israel. It is the criticize Israel department of
yeah.
the university. It does other things. People who don't do Israel are, but the overwhelming concentration of anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and by implication anti-Semitic activism in peace and conflict studies departments is just an indictment in itself.
I appreciate so much your real effort at being objective and balanced, and that's what I expect from a professor of sociology anyway. So thank you for that. Now, you mentioned that universities should regulate protests, ban encampments, and prevent incendiary imagery, just as they would with any group that risks getting out of hand. What do you think? Why do you think many university leaders have failed to do that?
So first, to provide context, I was quoting from another article. My own article that you read was a response to an article by a anti-Israel activist and human rights lawyer, in which he wrote that under this, new under the Australian approach to addressing anti-Semitism, they were banning protests, banning imagery, requiring licenses for marches. And I said, well, yeah, as they should. So, for example, anyone who's tried to organize a public demonstration or protest march will know you need a license to protest. You can't just go out in the street and close down a public road and start a protest. In almost every Western country that I'm aware of, you have to notify the police in advance. You have to state, what your protest route will be, how many people will be there for public safety reasons. This is routine. So what's wrong with having that on campus? Similarly, in Australia, at least, hate speech is regulated, much as in most of Europe, hate speech is regulated. Now, personally, I'm an American, and I'm very committed to the idea that there should be no rules on speech. Say what you want.
Yeah.
But that said, Australia does have laws against hate speech. So yes, there will be regulation of what's on those placards. Now, even as an American, I accept that in the campus environment,
Yeah.
you can put limits because the campus environment is not the public square. In the campus environment, there are people of all persuasions, including in this case, Jewish students and Jewish academics who work, teach, take classes on campus. So, of course, the same placard that I would accept in the public square, and personally, I would even accept anti-Jewish hate speech in the public square. I wouldn't endorse it, but I would tolerate it.
Hmm.
Can't be tolerated on campus because I have a choice whether or not to go into the public square and see that
Yeah.
hate speech. The Jewish student does not have a choice whether or not to come on campus and see the hate speech on campus. So of course that should be regulated. What you say, again, in a campus environment can and should be regulated. If you're going to march to a Jewish student meeting, carrying placards that say globalize the Intifada, and whatever you may say that the Intifada is really just an internal struggle, let's face it, there have been two very violent Intifadas in Palestine where many people have been killed in those Intifadas. Well, you're implicitly saying we're coming to kill you.
Yeah.
Implicitly, not explicitly, but implicitly. Well, that's not something you can have on a university campus. Of course, that should be suppressed. Of course, that should be prevented. Again, the public square is a different place. We can have a different debate about a registered, regulated protest in the public square where people have taken advantage of their civil right to protest. But a campus is a community. A campus is not the open space.
Exactly. Well, your piece focuses on Australia. This problem is clearly global, especially in the US
Oh,
and
yeah. The
Europe.
same issues apply.
To what extent do you see the same patterns of tolerated anti-Semitism repeating across Western universities?
Look, academia and the arts are the last refuges of anti-Semitism. You can be anti-Semitic in other places. You have to keep it quiet. You have to do it in private. You have to do it in hushed tones. In universities and the arts, you can be publicly anti-Semitic and you will sometimes be applauded for it. You will rarely be punished for it. It's simply acceptable in these circles. Now, not everywhere in these circles, not every university, not every environment. But unfortunately, universities which pride themselves on accepting a wide variety of viewpoints do tend to become a refuge. Now, in part, they're a refuge because universities have formal protections. I only have a job, and because I do controversial work, constantly expressing even this opinion on anti-Semitism that I presented is highly controversial.
Yeah.
It could get me in trouble. Many of my colleagues would condemn what I'm doing and seek retribution on me for saying it. But I have formal protections.
Yeah.
Well, the same formal protections for academic freedom that protect me protect them.
Yeah.
And that's something that is a good feature of a university. It's a functional and important feature of the university. But it does mean that if you do hold very unsavory views, not only about anti-Semitism, but on any issue, you can find protection at the university where you have formal protections that you won't find out in the rest of the world where you're subject to people's approval, tacit approval, if you want to keep your job, if you want to get customers, if you want to be in society. The stranger environment is the arts.
Yeah.
Because in the arts, there are no formal protections like this. Instead, it's just a popular viewpoint. I mean, actors, producers, writers who embrace anti-Semitism seem to face no opprobrium from their peers. Instead, the only check is that, again, to be very frank, Jewish donors have pulled the plug on many productions where the staff, where the artists themselves are extremely overtly anti-Semitic. Well, it shouldn't just be Jewish donors who pull the plug. My hope is that all donors would pull the plug on those kinds of productions. But unfortunately, we haven't seen that broad support for our Jewish fellow citizens, when it comes to anti-Semitism in the arts.
Interesting. Now, just on another note, in one of my travels in Israel, I was a speaker at a peace conference in Jerusalem last year, which was held at the Israeli Museum of Islamic Art. And what impressed me was that this beautiful museum with Islamic art, I mean, the finest pieces of Islamic art there are around the world, was presented with great pride by the Jewish owners and financed largely from the Knesset and from Jewish donors worldwide. So I'm happy to say that there are good exceptions of helping each other to promote the beauty of a nation's and people's art.
Sure. I mean, but look, the situation of non-Jewish and especially Muslim citizens of Israel is something we could have a legitimate debate about. There are, legitimate questions can be raised about it. But the idea that the focus on Israel that we have in Australia, I mean, Australia is half a world away from Israel. The idea that Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict should be a major political issue in Australia is flatly ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's only there because of the anti-Semitism. Again, when I talk about anti-Semitism, I'm not even vilifying Palestinian activists who oppose Israel. There's a long-term conflict. I know I do explicitly condemn the Hamas terrorists who killed civilians, young people, children, who raped women, who did horrific acts on October 7th, 2023. I mean, that's beyond the pale. I'm talking about ordinary Palestinians who oppose the existence of the state of Israel.
Yep.
I understand that.
Mhm.
I don't agree with them, but I understand it. Uh, what I don't think we can really understand in a sense of, heart to heart, human to human understanding is anti-Semitism in a place like Australia
Yeah.
or the United States or Norway. There's no excuse for it, right? Why should a Norwegian passionately hate the state of Israel?
Yeah.
It's a very strange thing for a Norwegian to hate.
There are Norwegians, by the way, who are ethnic Norwegians who are a part of the hatred of Israel, but a majority, when you look at the demonstrations, which amass a lot of people, they're largely Muslim immigrants in Norway. So that's an interesting observation.
Well, and it's understandable. I mean, to draw maybe a fine line, there's a lot of anti-Semitism in the Muslim world. There's also a lot of Islamophobia in
Sure.
the Western world and in Israel.
Yeah.
Um, but I would not attribute Muslim hatred of Israel automatically to anti-Semitism.
Mhm.
That is, there are many people from Muslim countries who, I don't endorse hatred of any kind, but I understand
Yeah.
the hatred that Israel's defeated my country in war.
Yeah.
Israel has suppressed co-religionists in Israel.
Yeah.
Israel, whoever's right or wrong, Israeli troops have killed other Muslims, in the Middle East. I even understand Muslim anti-Americanism. I'm American, and of course, America has bombed many Muslims in, Iran, Afghanistan, previously in Lebanon, and and again, I would understand that reaction. What I don't understand at a human level is a white Australian,
Yeah.
a white Norwegian,
Yeah.
an American of non-Muslim background, having a passionate hatred for Israel.
Yeah.
Uh, that seems to me it can only be driven by anti-Semitism, not by any truly understandable, human mechanism that I would sympathize with.
Exactly. Now, time flies fast with a great thinker like you, Dr. Babonis. But I have one last question. Actually, I have several, but we don't have time for them all. Uh, a lot of the Western universities are funded by states like Qatar, Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
Middle Eastern states. How does this uh, give fuel the anti-Semitism?
Look, it's a small part of the funding. That said, within individual disciplines, it can be a determinative part of the funding. And it does create these nodes that are at least friendly or hospitable to anti-Semitism. It doesn't mean that all they're doing is hiring anti-Semites, but it does mean they create spaces that are friendly to anti-Semitism. I mean, most Muslim majority countries are friendly to anti-Semitism. They may not be anti-Semitic, they may not endorse anti-Semitism. Many do support anti-Semitism. Some may not, but they are accepting of anti-Semitism as a normal part of life in society. And these
Dr.
research
Babones,
institutes,
you've already made your point clear. I have to stop
yeah,
there. Thank you so much, Dr. Babones. I look forward to having you again on my show, hopefully about this topic. And God bless you so much.
great to talk to you.